AI is not coming to take your job, but someone who knows how to use AI is coming to take your job.
I actually had to Google what your job title at Deloitte actually meant. So human capital practice involves advising clients on strategies to manage and optimize their workforce.
It's also about making work more human, more approachable, more satisfying, making that work experience better for all of the people who are going to work in that company. We actually use conjoint analysis, which is a marketing research tool to predict, is this person going to leave within the next year? And then how do we drive those things that will help to retain them?
You know, with 5 years now in the business, what were some of the biggest go-to-market campaigns that really moved the needle for your company?
Don't sleep on the mid-market. We often do focus on the larger enterprises, and yeah, there's absolutely huge opportunity there, but I think there's actually much greater opportunity for impact in small to mid-sized organizations.
What excites you about the future of work and technology now that, with AI around?
I think that AI takes.
Welcome to another episode of SaaS Stories. Today I'm joined by Amy Farner, Executive Vice President at the Josh Bersin Company, all the way in Arizona. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be with you today.
Amazing. Now, you've had quite an interesting career. I was doing some research on you, and I actually had to Google what your job title at Deloitte actually meant. So, human capital practice, which, according to Gemini, involves advising clients on strategies to manage and optimize their workforce by combining both business and people strategy. And I'd love to know more about that. So, business and people strategy, those are two very important things to scaling a business. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I think that that's really at the heart of everything that I've done throughout my career, and it's where I'm really passionate. So we in the human capital space are very often looking at kind of how do we optimize our people practices, but those kind of optimization projects really only make sense in the context of what is the business trying to achieve. So my role at Deloitte and at other organizations as well has always really centered around how do we help to create that connection between what the business is doing and how we equip the business with the people, with the skills, with a workforce that is excited, engaged, and committed, reliable, and wants to be pointed at where the business is going. And the particular angle that I've taken on it has always had a little bit of a data spin. So I've worked in surveys, I've worked in workforce analytics. So how do we kind of really make sure that we're bringing data to the table so that we can not just, kind of make a decision, we think this is what's going to work, but really analyze where is our workforce today and how do we bring it to where we need to be in order to match up the people to where the business is going.
Amazing. And so, speaking of data, excuse my ignorance, but tell me a little bit about why that's important and how that interest got sparked as well.
Yeah. So, I think data is absolutely critical. I've always been a very firm believer that, if you know one thing, you know one thing. If you have one data point, then you really don't know. You can't make decisions off of that. You can't find predictable outcomes off of that. And where that really got sparked in my career is actually, so I started my career in the late 90s, which was, if you remember, a previous technology disruption, the dot-com boom. So the
I remember that.
it was a fun time to enter the workforce, right? Because you could go stand on a corner and wave your resume, and a VC-funded startup would say, "Oh, it was lovely." But, all of these incumbent employers were struggling with this transformation because they were competing with these well-funded startups that were saying, "We've got a pool table. We've got really fun work environments." And they said, "How do we get people to stay?" And so I started working at the time. The organization that I was working with started up an employee survey product that was based on a causal model for what are those behavioral and observable factors that predict retention, that predict, is this person going to leave within the next year? And then how do we drive those things that will help to retain them? So what are going to be the highest impact opportunities to drive retention? We actually use conjoint analysis, which is a marketing research tool to do it. it was so much fun because it was just really exciting to say the science backs this up and we're able to create observable change. And we were able to go back a year later and say, well, did the people who we predicted were at the highest risk of departure leave? Yeah, they were, right? So the science works. And we were able to then use that information to help drive a positive work environment that was really well aligned with the preferences and needs of that workforce. And I think that's kind of the second piece of it is as I talk about it, it's really exciting for me to get into the data. I love talking about that analytical piece. But when I think about what makes it all come to life is that this isn't just about helping companies make more money by, in that case, reducing turnover. It's also about making work more human, more approachable, more satisfying, making that work experience better for all of the people who are going to work in that company. Because nobody says, oh, I can't wait to quit my job. People want to be in a job that fulfills them and they're excited about.
That's true. I'm so relieved to hear you say that as well because I'm a data geek myself and I just love diving into it. Um, Coming back to what you said about, behavioral factors that can predict retention or people leaving, I think that's quite a big one because I think people are at the heart of the company and it's the people that determine whether a company is going to thrive or not thrive and, succeed or not succeed. So I think it's in everyone's best interest to keep their employees for as long as possible, especially if they've spent all that time training them, investing in them. So, what are maybe some of those factors that you saw in the data that kind of went, oh, I think this person might be leaving soon?
So, interestingly, when we looked at this in 1999, 2000, the number one predictor, believe it or not, of whether someone was going to leave is that they actually would tell you that they were going to leave. So if
And I
you,
don't
so if
do that anymore.
but it wasn't, hey, I called my manager and said, I'm out of here tomorrow. But if you ask on a survey, hey, have you engaged in these job search behaviors in the last 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? They're shockingly honest. And so that absolutely helps. But the other thing that we found was that, because employees, and we've been talking for so long about the employer value proposition, if you are putting out there an EVP that is authentic to the organization and that your employees buy into, then that alignment is going to drive retention because people are saying, I'm getting what I signed up for. And so I couldn't say, hey, if you pay people 200% of the market rate, you're going to retain them. Maybe, I hope you would, but actually what we find is that pays a dissatisfier. It doesn't actually keep people happy that long. But what I can say is that if your employee value proposition, if what you're signaling to the market and bringing people in on is, hey, we have amazing compensation, but the lived experience doesn't match that lived experience, then you have a much larger swath of your workforce that's at risk of departure. And so really being able to measure not what I say my employer brand is, but what is the actual employer brand that is expressed by the experiences of our employees, and then how do we optimize around that? And if that's not aligned with where the business needs to go from a financial, from a product, from a skills, from whatever perspective, then you need to take a step back and adjust that to ensure that you do have a brand that is authentic to the organization and is aligned with what you need to do in order to achieve your strategy.
I completely agree with that. I don't think money maybe motivates people for about a month and then the happiness just starts to decrease quite quickly after that. We've recently implemented what I would call clarity, like career clarity for, especially for our juniors in the company, where we've kind of laid out what you can expect and the growth opportunities to be in the next 5 years. And I think that's one thing that really helps because I remember my first ever job leaving it because I just saw no future there, and I was like, I don't know what I'm meant to be doing here in the next 5 years."
I'm glad you say that because if you think about, we've been talking for, oh my gosh, it's been probably 8, 9 years. We've been talking about future of work and the idea of career path. We're getting rid of career paths and we have latticed careers. And as someone who did enter the workforce during a time of very, very structured career paths, that terrified me because what I loved was being able to log into work or show up to work physically those days and say, okay, today I'm a senior analyst. And if I want to make it to that next step in my career, here's the job I'm going to be doing. And here's what I have to do to get to that place. And when we start saying, well, you're really collecting experiences and you can go in any direction that you'd like, that can feel overwhelming, particularly, as you said, for more junior folks in the firm. And so I think that striking that balance to say your responsibility to equip you with the foresight and the knowledge and the skills and the experiences that are going to help you to align to the right opportunity for you.
And so taking a step back a little bit and coming back to kind of your journey now as vice president at the Josh Bersin Company, how have you taken, everything you've learned about data and everything you've learned about HR and applied it now? And tell us a little bit about what the company does. What are the main product offerings?
At the core of what we do is we help organizations and HR professionals to make better decisions and to drive their people strategies in alignment with the business strategy. So exactly where we started today. Josh has been in this field. So our founder, Josh Bersin, has been in this field for over 20 years. And he and I actually met at Deloitte. So that's actually kind of a shared legacy. And when we started the company back in 2019, 2020, really where we were focused on is how can we help to build capabilities for HR professionals and for HR organizations. So we actually started with a learning and development tool that we called the Josh Bersin Academy. We've now evolved that. We call it Galileo Learn. It's part of our core product suite, but that's kind of one key component. And that was really the founding key component is how do we help equip this function with the skills and capabilities that they need. On top of that, we also have always, as an organization, and many of us as individuals have been really passionate about doing research, and that really brings that data piece into it. And so, how do we do both quantitative and qualitative research to help organizations set strategy on critical issues? How do you build your EX strategy? How do you understand how to become a world-class learning and development organization? What are those organizations that are seeing outsized impact having what are they doing differently and how can you chart a course to get there? And so from there, we really started partnering with organizations in an advisory capacity, publishing research. But where things really got to really kind of started to get very interesting was with the advent of generative AI. So ChatGPT hit the market, and so we were there. We were writing a ton of research. We were helping to upskill individuals and organizations. We were partnering on advisory projects. But we really, generative AI hit the market, and Josh said, "This is amazing. We need to do something with this." And so we started putting all of that collective wisdom from our team, from 25 plus years of research, of insights, of podcasts, of blog posts, all of these things into an AI engine and saying, well, what can we do with this? And that was really the birth of Galileo, our agent. And so we now have kind of two core products that we've built off of those research and insights. We have our Galileo agent and we have Galileo Learn. And those products are linked. So the Galileo agent essentially is, as I said, it's an AI agent. So an HR professional can go in there and can ask whatever questions they need to help support them. They can enter the prompts to help them to navigate to information. Give me 5 case studies of financial services organizations that have struggled to recruit early career professionals, and you can pull that out of our content and it'll serve you up exactly as a generative AI tool would, a summary information about it. But you also can flip it to start to do work for you as well. So for example, write me a job description that's focused on the skills that are most important for data analysts in the finance function. And because we have this tremendous wealth of knowledge, which is based on both our research and insights, but also information that we've partnered with organizations through our Trusted Content Partner program to bring massive data sources on labor markets, on competency and skill models, all of these other pieces that aren't necessarily the research we do ourselves, we're able to find a ton of use cases for that. So, those are the tools is really a learning platform and an AI agent. But at the foundation of all of this is our research and insights, because you could go out to ChatGPT and ask these questions and you're going to get an answer. But it's not necessarily going to be a great answer. And it's not necessarily going to be based on trusted content that you can bring to your boss and say, yeah, I stand behind this. This is a recommendation that I'm very excited about.
Yeah. I definitely want to do a deep dive in AI, but I'm just going to close off on the data points. It sounds like you've done quite a lot of surveys, quite a lot of research. It sounds like you've got a lot of data at your fingertips. I just want to ask, what has maybe surprised you the most from learning everything you've learned from those tools?
I think what surprised me the most is not necessarily an answer I found in the data, so much as the difficulty that we've had kind of often bringing that data to the table. And so I find that in many cases, we're still struggling to say we're able to build a case that's based on data. We're able to build these answers and really kind of stand behind them based on what the data are telling us. I think that that's as an HR function is maybe a little bit controversial. I think that really mature organizations are absolutely there. They have really robust and well-respected data organizations that are a key strategic player in the decision-making process. But I think that for a lot of organizations, that's still a growth point for them, building that comfort, building that data agility, and really making sure that they can advocate for the right answers that they're able to identify.
And so coming back to AI, what do you feel like the HR industry is adopting it at a good pace? Where do you see the shifts happening over the next 5 years?
This is moving really, really fast. Um, so
I wonder if people are moving at the same pace though, because AI is absolutely learning at a very fast pace, but are people adopting it and are they, I suppose, trusting it at a pace that allows us to get there as well?
in my opinion, I think that the technology has outpaced the human ability to use the technology in many areas, not in every area. And I think what we're seeing is that so first off, there are some low hanging fruit that just absolutely makes sense. So, for example, if you look at software engineers, that labor market is being completely disrupted by AI. And it makes sense because there's a lot of logic in there. It's something that is highly trustable. It's very easy to convert that to, we're going to now use these AI tools and reinvent the way that we write code. That is just a perfect fit. And I also think there you have an audience that's very receptive to bringing these technologies in. In terms of the HR field, what we're seeing is that there's like a really broad range of adoption. And so it's going to vary by organization. So, for example, larger, more sophisticated organizations, they have more resources to throw at this. So they have AI task forces. They're able to take a very structured approach, and they have demands from their executive teams, and they have sometimes demands from shareholders to show results, and that's going to create the urgency. But within those organizations, there's still going to be a range of individual comfort, and I think every organization, even the most mature ones that I talk to, are telling me we've got people who are outpacing everyone else in the organization. They're using AI daily, they're reinventing processes, they're using Copilot Studio to build bespoke agents. We're doing amazing things. And I have people who I'm struggling to get them to open a tool. And I always thought that would be like generational, right? But it's not necessarily generational. There are some generational trends, of course, but it truly it's that's not all that it is. And then I think also across organizations, you're going to see in those smaller and less well resourced organizations, they're maybe not able to bring in those AI tools that are easier to use, right? If you're going to Chat GPT and trying to just hack your own agent together to automate processes and workflows and to reinvent the way work is being done, you have a hard path ahead of you. Versus if you can say, I'm going to go buy a talent acquisition agent off the shelf and someone's going to hold my hand and make sure that we are now completely revolutionizing our talent acquisition processes through the use of AI.
Yeah, absolutely. I think ChatGPT, it's a good starting point, but you need to take that AI and then obviously structure it in a way that's just going to work for the way people want to learn, want to absorb, you know, the learning capabilities and the product. Kind of being in the hiring space, and also, it sounds like you're way ahead with AI. Are you finding that people and employers are now, preferring to use AI instead of hiring employees, or do you see kind of different roles opening up around AI?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't see, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of, you know, press stories around, we're cutting our workforce by X%, we're cutting our IT organization, we're cutting our HR organization based on the efficiencies that we found from AI. When I have conversations with folks who are really kind of in the trenches around that, you listen, it's happening. And often it's happening where there is a high demand to prove results to shareholders. Absolutely. But I think that for the most part, there still is a tremendous value on, getting the right people. You will, if you can hire the right person who's the right fit for your organization, you're always going to want to bring that person in. But what I heard in the second part of your question that I think is really important is how are those roles shifting, right? And so the jobs are beginning to and are going to continue to evolve. And so I think what we're seeing is almost a collapsing of roles, so that instead of having a whole bunch of kind of subject matter experts, centers of excellence, things like that, we don't need a huge workforce of those. What we need is a very agile, individual who can work across all of those and do the essentially human part and partner with the business and be the face of this great work that's being done through the AI. And I think it's a little bit of a cliche I've heard out there, AI is not coming to take your job, but someone who knows how to use AI is coming to take your job. And I think that, that's really true. So what we're going to see is that the roles I do think will begin to collapse and simplify with the use of these agents.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's history repeating itself on multiple occasions, but I do wonder if this one's different. I always wonder. I've got kids, and I'm trying to figure out: do I teach them technical skills? Do I teach them human skills, people skills? What do you think is the valuable skill set of the future?
So I also have kids. I have one in college, one about to go to college. I think number one is agility. Um,
Yes.
that is absolutely key. The pace of this change is intense. And individuals who can keep pace with that change in an area where they're passionate about, whether they are passionate about, technology, about, I mean, listen, some of us are very passionate about human resources, right? But you've got to be agile. And so that is one of those, we call them power skills, used to be called soft skills. I think that's really important. There is still a place for technical expertise, so even though perhaps you can use AI to do a lot of coding, there needs to be a human who understands that code. AI has an error rate. How are you catching those errors? How are you accommodating those? How are you implementing new technologies? Because this is not a static discovery that we're going to now reinvent work and say, we're done. What's going to happen is we're going to continue to see these tools advance, and organizations are going to have to continue to adjust and adapt to keep pace with this just absolutely nonstop pace of change.
Yeah, I agree with that. Coming back again to Galileo, and it sounds like you launched in the wonderful year that was 2019. uh, just wondering, with 5 years now in the business, what were some of the biggest go-to-market campaigns that really moved the needle for your company?
That's a great question. So we tend to get some of our biggest go-to-market campaigns are really focused on our research and our insights. That's what people look to us for. So that's been actually just a huge learning for us is the technology is an enabler of the content and the insights. It doesn't replace the content and the insights. So our team of researchers, they are using AI. They're using Galileo on a daily basis. Absolutely. But there's humans who are really kind of behind that. And so it doesn't take the place of that. And so, for example, we released about 2 years ago some work on systemic HR. And it's really about how organizations need to evolve their HR models and their HR operating structures and all of the pieces of HR to be more systemic in nature, more interconnected, more data driven. And that has been really, really powerful for us. I also would say that, Galileo itself has been just really absolutely a huge driver for our organization. And the reason for that is, I think two things. The first is Galileo is a democratization tool. So historically, our research, our insights, and all the things that you can do with them were available to people who want to sit down and read a 100-page PDF. That's a very small group. And so Galileo actually allows users to access that research and insights in a way that meets their purposes. If they just need to dig out that one case example that's going to make a difference and help them prove, a hypothesis that they have, they can identify that very quickly. So that democratization of information and the ability to very easily share it more broadly across the organization because it's accessible and it's indexed and it's easy to find. I know that sounds like a really low hanging fruit use case for AI, but that's been very powerful for us. And then the other piece is that, Galileo also is an agent for personalization. So we may write kind of that strategic insight research at the top that says, here's strategically where you should be going. But I was constantly hearing from the organizations we work with, that's great. What do I do next? How do I create an implementation plan? What are the first 5 things I should do? How do I build the case for this for my CEO so that I can get funding to do what you're recommending here? And historically, we couldn't keep pace with those requests because there is no one size fits all answer to those questions. So by feeding Galileo with the content and expertise that our team has, we can now create much more personalized approaches where does it replace a member of our team sitting down with you for an hour and advising and supporting you? No, of course not. But it equips a much broader swath of the organization to have access to those tools. And it makes that hour much more powerful because there's so much more that can be done to kind of begin to really personalize the research into how do we operationalize this in my organization.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is it sounds like you've really optimized your content marketing there because what you're providing is original research. Sounds like a lot of templates as well, which, HR managers would be searching for. Is that right? Is there any other kind of content that you find has worked really well for your target audience? And how did you go about understanding, what their pain points were, what they wanted?
Learning content, I would say, is the third pillar that I would put there. And so, for us, we are building, and, as I mentioned earlier, we started with the Josh Bersin Academy. The academy was built on the, state of the art in 2019 learning platform. But one of our major projects this year has been to move it over to an AI native learning platform that is connected very deeply with the AI agent as well. So what that means is that our team is now pushing out new deep dive learning content at a pace that we never could have done previously. And that's really important because I don't think, a lot of people are saying, well, AI gets rid of training. You don't need training. You go to ChatGPT and you ask the question. I believe that there is absolutely a role for structured learning. I believe that most users don't know necessarily when they need structured learning versus the answer to a quick question. They just know they have a need that's unmet. So if I can walk through what that value chain might look like, the user goes to the AI and they're, and says, "Hey, I heard someone say the term career pathways in a meeting and I didn't know what that was." So, Galileo, tell me about career pathways. And Galileo will answer the question definitionally. But depending on my role, depending on my need, maybe what I heard in the meeting is, Amy, you're going to be responsible for implementing career pathways at our organization. In that case, as part of the information that's surfaced by Galileo, I may get recommended a learning course on career pathways. It's actually going to teach me how to implement career pathways within my organization. And I can seamlessly launch into that learning activity. So we think of that as kind of the breakdown between knowledge and learning. And I think that's really important. And then the learning experience in Galileo Learn is an AI first learning experience. Again, similarly personalized and customized, and a lot of exciting stuff there. So I think that's the category of content that I would also flag.
Yeah, yeah. It makes sense. I heard a really interesting stat once that said, those who out educate their competitors are the ones that get all the customers. I'm going to play devil's advocate just for a minute, though. And so, for all the organizations out there that are thinking, all right, we need to build, a structured learning content platform that we can attract people with. I mean, what's to stop people just from going to LinkedIn Learning or Udemy instead?
I think that there's absolutely learning content in LinkedIn Learning and Udemy. And so, I think that those are a great source for general learning content. But what we're seeing in the age of AI is that personalization wins every time. And that plays out in two different ways. The first is I want to be able to personalize this learning content to my organization. And listen, I'm using the term structured learning for kind of like that tradition, like there's a place for a course, but actually we're seeing, that structure can become incredibly flexible where one of our clients may come to us and say, I love your course on, we'll stick with the example of career pathways, but we actually already have career pathways in finance in our organization. So how do we customize this content so that we can draw on our lessons learned? That ability to do so is really, really seamless because it is an AI native platform. And so that's been a really powerful way for organizations to customize the learning experience and the learning content. Then the other side of that is the personalization on the individual learner side. And so we've done a really good job for years and years and years of saying, you want to learn about something? Go click through this training course, watch the videos, and we're delivering the same content to every single person. The ability to personalize that experience through AI is absolutely endless. So maybe I want to learn about career pathways, but rather than, watch videos and page through a course, I think I know some stuff. So I want the platform to create a quiz for me based on all of the learning content that I've consumed previously to test where I am and then only deliver to me the things that I don't know. Or maybe I want the learning platform. I don't really learn very well by watching videos. I learn through having conversations with people. So pop up an AI avatar for me and let me have a conversation with that avatar. And what's really powerful about this is that it's not, wow, we have a whole bunch of different options. It's that all of those options are accessible by the learner. So the learner doesn't have to say, gosh, I wish I could take that course with an AI avatar, but they didn't put an AI avatar in that one. The learner can say, there's no AI avatar yet. Let me click this button and have what I need for my purposes generated. Maybe I prefer to learn by listening to podcasts. Great. Take this course and turn it into a podcast so I can listen to it on my run this afternoon. That's all very easily possible. And so I think that's really the power that you see through these AI native platforms. It's not just buying a content library. The content library is key, but it's activated by the technology.
I love that. I think the keyword there is personalization because you're right. LinkedIn Learning, Udemy, great. But again, I think the word you used there was generic, which true, there's no personalization, so to say. I love the idea of turning a course into a podcast because that would be my way of learning. And I know I've experimented with a few AIs where I've plugged in a guide and I've said, turn this into a podcast that I can just listen to on the go because there's no way I'm going to sit there and read, 10 pages of a guide. There's just no time for that. But what are some of the key personalization that you put into these courses? Like, obviously one of them being turn it into this bit of content that, I want to either listen to or watch or read, depending on my learning style. Another one I think might be, based off learning styles. So some people are tactile learners, others are visual learners. What's other personalization that you apply to that?
Yeah, so what's really cool is that this is all powered by an AI tutor that has an open-ended box there. So you could ask for whatever you want. Create a graphic for me that show I want to see an infographic that describes the content in this course. Create a quiz for me. What are some of the other ones that we've seen that I like? Oh, can you give me a specific example? Because this is hooked up to, there's the information in the course, but it's hooked up to all of that content that we've created. So if I say, "Oh, I'm really interested in the concept here, can you give me a specific example of what this looks like?" It could be, "Talk to me about this." So that's really bring up that AI avatar. There's just, I mean, the possibilities are endless. The AI tutor prompts the user with contextual um, suggestions. So as you launch the AI tutor, it might say, because you're at the beginning of the course, maybe you want to take a quiz to see how well you know this, or maybe you want to generate a summary of the course to make sure that it's aligned with what you want to do. But as you go deeper and deeper into the learning content, those contextual suggestions from your AI tutor will shift and change. And they're always accompanied by that free form text box that is just, it's that LLM text box that's going to let you ask for whatever you would like. The other thing that we're really excited about is the opportunity to create ultra personalized learning pathways. So not just saying I'm within a course and able to customize that, but maybe I'm saying, hey, I'm on a, so I could say, I have a 6-month journey. I've been told by my boss that if I can really beef up these skills over the next 6 months, I'll be up for promotion. And I'm really excited about diving deep into these skills. Can you create a journey for me? And the system may say, well, how many courses have you already taken? What experiences do you already have? And so creating that customized opportunity. And I will say, we're talking a lot about the platform. I want to be transparent. I didn't create the platform. We partnered with an organization called Sana out of Stockholm, Sweden. Their platform actually powers a lot of that innovation. And what we found is that, again, that combination of the platform plus the content has been really, really magical for us.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. It sounds exciting. I can think of a few really smart technical people that have had to sit like really difficult Microsoft and Cisco exams. And even though they know everything, they're really smart. But when they sit that exam, it just goes wrong. Like they just can't do it. They can't get through that. And studying for it, I've seen kind of the videos that they have to watch. They're not that terribly exciting. So, having an option where you can learn in your own style in a way that's actually effective is very exciting. I think a lot of people will benefit from that. Coming back to go-to-market strategies again and scaling the business, aside from this wonderful personalization and content, what channels have worked really well for you? Have you tried partnerships, for example? Uh, any specific kind of social channels that have worked better? Just for anyone in a SaaS organization just wondering where to begin with their go-to-market strategies, what are some recommendations?
Yeah, so we have two ways that we go to market. We have both direct to consumer channels and we have business to business channels. And that's been really powerful for us. We were always business to business for years and years and years. And all of us here, many of us have worked together in different iterations in our history, and all of us had that really strong business to business experience. And so that's something that's been very exciting as we talk about kind of that democratizing power of the technology, is that now you don't have to work at a great big company that that is chosen to bring us in and that has the funding to do that. You could say, I want to go and I want to make this available to myself for my own professional development to help support me in the work that I'm doing. And that's available and accessible to users. So, in terms of the channels and the go-to-market strategies that have worked really well for us, number one, having that hybrid model where we can say, how can we support organizations who say we want to transform the way that HR is leveraging AI to modernize and transform their organization? Yes, we can work with you to help you to build that strategy, to give you the tools that will build that strategy, to partner with you in that way. But then also on the direct to consumer side, having that dual availability has been really, really powerful for us. I think another thing that I would say is, particularly for organizations that are in the HR space, don't sleep on the mid-market, because for those of us who do come from the Deloittes of the world, we often do focus on the larger enterprises, and yeah, there's absolutely huge opportunity there. But I think there's actually much greater opportunity for impact in small to mid-sized organizations because they often are starved for those HR resources. And so we found it's been incredibly powerful for us to help amplify what is often an undersized, under-resourced team in these smaller organizations. So I think that's been very powerful. In terms of go-to-market strategy in the direct-to-consumer side, that's been a lot of fun for us because, again, it's something we haven't been able to do in the past. And now we're building social media ads and we're able to, kind of think about how do you build UGC type of ads and things like that. That's fun and also a little scary. But, but that's been really, really powerful for us as well, is really just saying, how do we break through all of the kind of, the influencer noise that's out there, and help us do that. I think the final thing I'll say, you mentioned partnerships, and I don't know if this is kind of where you're going with this, but I wanna kind of touch on that a little bit because I think for anyone who's starting up in the AI space, this is like a really, from my perspective, a really important point. Right now, we are in an era of agents everywhere. There are so many agents, and we are battling for mind space, and we are battling for the digital employee experience. And so you really need to think about if you are building an agentic solution for business, you need to think about how is that going to fit into the mindset of your workers. Because if you're going to say you're going to have to remember every time you do task X, you need to remember to come to me and launch my product and use my product for task X, you've got to be able to integrate that experience. And so we've worked very closely with other technology partners that serve the HR space to say, how can we integrate the Galileo experience so that users don't have to say, I forgot to go to Galileo. So, for example, working with HCMs like HiBob, which serves the mid-market space, a really fantastic disruptor in that space, integrating with them, integrating with ServiceNow, where there's a lot of the actual day-to-day work being done by managers and by HR professionals. That creates a front end that gives easy access to Galileo's benefits.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, actually, because I think a lot of people, in organizations are probably wondering, how do we build our own AI capabilities and agents? But really, it makes sense to go and partner with someone who's already done it and just use theirs and just, it's going to get there much quicker, right?
Yeah. Well, I think it depends on the organization. A lot of organizations I talk to are saying, yeah, no, we're going to build our own GPT. But what they're looking for is we want an agent to agent transaction so that when a question is asked that is best served by Galileo, our GPT is going to call Galileo and bring that response in. So we're going to build that consolidated front end. Some are saying, you know what, Copilot, that's our consolidated front end. Because guess what? They've already got all of our documents anyway.
Yeah.
And so it could be a build strategy for some organizations, but the key is the interoperability and the integrations. As long as you're structuring your solution so that you can flexibly meet the preferences of the organizations where they really want to centralize that. We don't know who that winner of everybody's eyes is going to be just yet.
Yeah. And coming back to go to market, it sounds like diversifying has been a good strategy for you because you've kind of touched on the enterprise level clients, but also mid market. But then you're also doing B2B and B2C. I just want to close off on with one question on that, and that's, have you found that the messaging between B2B and B2C is different? Because it is the same human at the end of the day. They do have the same buying behaviors. Do you find that you have to do completely different messaging to those two in campaigns, or is it same things kind of work?
There are differences. I would say it's not completely different. Our value proposition remains the same. Our brand remains the same. but the messaging does need to change because often the B2C consumer is I am spending my own money. So I need to understand how is this going to help me as an individual be more efficient, be more effective, apply AI to the work that I'm doing, learn the skills that I need. Whereas at the B2C level, we're really looking at how, I have to be able to justify this to whomever is my budget approver. So I need to be able to say, not how is this going to help me, but how is building this skill base, transforming these operational processes, whatever it is, how is that going to move the organization forward? So it's a different kind of ROI conversation. And so we need to be able to show different levels of value depending on who's ultimately paying the bill.
Yeah, for sure. Closing the podcast more on a personal reflection type note. You touched on the future of work there for a second. I remember that being such an overused bit of content 5 years ago, like future of work, future of work. Um, but what excites you about the future of work and technology now that, with AI around?
I think everything excites me about this because I think that AI takes, so I'm the parent of kids who are on the cusp of entering the workforce. The world that they are entering is so different. And I think about the beginning of my career and the amount of time that was spent kind of very slowly building skills, very slowly kind of, working my way through processes that often didn't feel incredibly human because you really, when you work in some fields, you're just throwing humans at the work. We don't have to just throw humans at the work anymore. We have an opportunity to really optimize the work experience for this next generation of workers where we can say, you get to do the things that light you up. You don't have to, pay your dues by doing 20 years of just churning through SPSS analysis and grabbing your output and writing syntax and whatever it is. These tools, and yeah, some of these things may have been automatable 20 years ago, but not every organization had the resources to do so. That democratization factor, powered with the transformative nature of AI, is going to completely change and accelerate career paths, which is where agility comes in again. I just think that we're setting up this next generation of workers to have such incredibly exciting careers. I am, as a mom and as someone who focuses on, how we can make work better for people, I am really, really excited about that.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of parents are scared though. They're thinking like, "Oh no, what with AI around, what kind of jobs are they gonna have?" But what advice are you giving your children?
So, number one, absolutely down to the fundamentals. So, you still need to learn how to keep your calendar up to date in Outlook, to respond to emails in a timely manner. I mean, these are skills that I think like you can't lose that. AI, I mean, maybe Galileo will start responding to my emails, but probably not. And so I think absolutely focusing on those fundamentals is critical. And then, don't be afraid of the technology. I have one child who's a freshman in college who's choosing to go into an artistic field, and he says, AI can never replace art. And no, AI can't replace art, but you're going to need to learn to operate in an environment where AI is applied to art and figure out how to work in this environment and create art that you can stand behind using these tools. My other son, all in on AI, all in on technology. And so I think, for him, he's, they are both going to have to a little bit meet in the middle. My son who's all in on technology needs to keep the human in there and keep those fundamentals there. My son who says, nope, this isn't, it's not art, is going to need to learn to be a little bit more flexible in his thinking and really make sure that he's able to really identify what makes it art and where you can make that art better through the use of the new technologies and tools.
Yeah.
And
It
that's just
sounds
like a whole other conversation on art and technology that my son is better equipped to have than me.
it sounds like you're gonna have a really interesting journey ahead of you to see where each one goes and I guess where things go in the end, and I don't know who does better.
I'm very interested to see that as well.
Amy, my last question for you, it's a bit of a tradition on this podcast, is if you could go back in time and give yourself one bit of advice, it could be at any point in the past, where would you go and what advice would that be?
Wow, that's a really good question. I think that for a long time, I fought technology. Because I started in a very analytical role, I used a lot of technology, but I had a tendency to kind of brute force through things because it was really, really satisfying to to get through and be like, well, now I understand it because I've done it. I've touched every part of it. That is a very, it really kind of was limiting sometimes because it limited my capacity, it limited my productivity, and it also kept me from opening my eyes to not just how do I do things faster, but how do I transform? Maybe I can do things I couldn't do previously. It took me a long time to get to that point, and I think now, given the environment that we're in, I'm there, but had I gotten there earlier, I wonder what other kind of opportunities I might have been able to take advantage of by saying, I'm gonna jump in with both feet to do something in a new and exciting way versus being like, this is the way that just feels really good.
I love that. Thank you. Thanks so much for being on the show. I think we've learned a lot about the different kind of learning content that we can all go away and apply. And I'll definitely be checking Galileo out. Thanks, Amy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to chat today.